Mm, Hello everyone, welcome to our post presentation. So, at first, let us start with a question. How many times have you heard that the best way to learn a language is to observe it naturally? It sounds beautiful, right? Just immerse yourself and the grammar will magically fall into place.
It definitely sounds romantic, but today we are here to challenge that illusion. In the field of English language teaching, there is a massive debate between implicit acquisition and explicit instruction. Today we stand firmly on the side of structure, clarity, and efficiency. Grammar should be taught explicitly.
Exactly. Leaving grammar to chance is a diversive to our learners. Diverse to our learners. In this presentation, we are going to defend explicit instruction through four main pillars that you can see right here on our poster. First, we will look at the cognitive needs of adult learners and how explicit grammar acts as a vital anchor for their analytical minds.
Second, we will shift to the real world with academic and professional success, followed by the crucial distinction between casual and professional language. Finally, we will show how explicit rules build metacognitive awareness and self-correction, allowing students to become independent monitors of their own speech.
But we are not here to present our side. To make our case bulletproof, we have paired each of our pillars against a major counter argument from the opposition. We will actively refute their claims regarding natural acquisition, negative flashback effect, learners' motivation, and the famous knowledge versus ability gap.
We want to show you that this criticism only happens when grammar is taught incorrectly. When taught right, explicit grammar transforms language learning from a game of guesswork into a predictable science that empowers students to comment board.
Let's begin with my part, which focuses on the distinction between casual and professional language. As language educators, we often see students who can converse comfortably in daily life. However, we must realize that implicitly acquiring a language just by listening to music or watching TV, chatting online, often leads to what we call street fluency. While street fluency is great for social interaction, it predominantly consists of colloquial, informal structures. Unfortunately, these structures are highly inappropriate for academic or formal contexts. This is exactly where explicit grammar and vocabulary instruction becomes vital. We need to foster a register awareness in our learners. Register awareness isn't just about knowing words, it's about highlighting the subtle, critical differences in syntax, punctuation, and tone. For instance, a student with street fluency might consistently use the active voice because it sounds natural in the conversation. But through explicit teaching, we show them how the passive voice is structurally preferred in academic writing to maintain objectivity. And ultimately, teaching register provides our learners with precision in nuance. It empowers them to deliberately manipulate the language. Instead of being trapped in one casual way of speaking, they learn how to adjust their sentences to convey precise degrees of formality, politeness, and professional authority. We are not just teaching them how to adapt to the professional world. And um I want to talk about proactive intervention and aggressive baselining. Uh, these are the deal in language learning, error facilitation. To understand why explicit instruction is necessary, we must first define what fossilization is. In linguistics, fossilization refers to the permanent internalization of uncorrected grammatical errors in a learner's interlanguage. When a student makes a mistake and that mistake is repeatedly ignored, their brain accepts it as a correct rule. Once an error becomes fossilized, it is incredibly difficult to correct because it turns into a subconscious habit. To prevent this linguistic trap, we advocate for proactive intervention. As teachers, we cannot just sit back and hope that students will magically correct themselves through exposure. We must explicit feedback is a because it's a powerful tool. It directly targets these errors and breaks bad linguistic habits before they settle into the students' subconscious routines.
Hello, everyone. In this part, our primary goal is not just to present the benefits, but to directly address and challenge two common arguments often cited as disadvantages or cons. Let us look beyond initial critics to understand that these concepts are not in opposition to explicit teaching, but are in fact complementary and necessary for linguistic success. Let us first address the theoretical debate surrounding the process of learning itself, natural acquisition versus conscious learning. The conventional argument suggests that language should only be subconsciously acquired through natural, communicative exposure, positioning, conscious learning, and the purposeful study of grammatical rules as a less effective or even harmful process. Arguments often implies that explicit teaching creates a divide between knowing a rule and being able to use it. We contend that this is a false dichotomy. Explicit instruction does not seek to replace natural acquisition. It prepares the ground for it, making it far more efficient. We must particularly consider the specific cognitive needs of adult learners. While natural acquisition might be effective for children, adult learners frequently lack the extensive time and unguided input necessary for purely implicit edification. Direct presentation of rules using our deductive approach provides a crucial cognitive scaffold. When a learner consciously understands a rule, they are not passively waiting for acquisition to occur. They are actively matching new communicative input against their known grammatical framework. A rule-aware learner is far more adept at identifying and self-correcting common pitfalls, preventing the kind of persistent, fossilized errors that our posture seeks to eliminate. Far from being a separate and contradictory path, conscious learning provides the necessary architectural blueprint that allows natural acquisition to be structured, durable, and highly accurate. The relationship is not one of opposition, but of informed synergy. Moving from the theoretical level to practical pedagogy, let us now examine the perceived impact on teaching practices, negative washback effects on teaching. The washback effect refers to the impact that assessments and exams have on teaching. Critic here is that a focus on direct grammatical rules and explicit testing force instructors into a rigid test-focused mode, stifling communicative practice and resulting in classrooms filled with tedious drills. Argument represents that not an inherent flaw in explicit teaching itself, but a critique of poorly implemented pedagogy and assessment design. Truly effective explicit instruction, as detailed in our poster's infographic, is not a dead end of drills and fill in the blank exercise. The rule presentation and analysis stages are designed to build a deep underlying understanding of form and function. Understanding is then reinforced through controlled practice and critically immediately applied in free communicative production. Explicit knowledge of rules is what empowers a student to communicate with deliberate precision. Rules are not barriers to freedom. They are the framework upon which accurate and nuanced self-expression is constructed. Furthermore, the concept of pushback can be harnessed for a positive effect. High-stakes assessments that in a balanced, communicatively embedded context can create a serious, high-standard learning environment. Washback becomes negative only if the exam focuses on grammar in isolation. By advocating for integrated teaching methods that move from structured rules to contextualized function, we can ensure that explicit teaching results in genuine, dual functioning communicative competence. In conclusion, by examining these 2 points in depth, we have shown that conscious learning and natural acquisition are not incompatible processes, but a complementary duo, and that negative washback is a symptom of poor integration, not an inherent failure of explicit teaching. Explicit instruction, with its structured, deductive methods, provides essential foundation that accelerates natural acquisition and gives learners a defined path to both academic success and genuine, confident communications. They are the building blocks that allow learners to construct clarity and meaning in a new language. Thank you for your attention.
So now let's look at the pros of the explicit grammar and why we should teach. At first, like when we discuss language teaching methodology, we often romanticize the way children acquire their first language. We hear words like immersion and subconscious acquisition like everywhere. But today, I want to bring us to a biological and psychological reality. Adults are not children. Their brain functions differently, their schedules are different, and their cognitive needs are unique. Therefore, to teach adults effectively, grammar must be taught explicitly. So, what is the reality of the adult's brain? Let's look at the science of the adult's brain. Unlike children who possess a high level of neuroplasticity that allows them to absorb language implicitly, adults' brains rely heavily on the analytical processes and metacognitive awareness. Adults need to know why a structure works like it does. Asking an adult to spend thousands of hours sitting in an immersive environment, hoping they will subconsciously figure out the difference between the present perfect and the past simple, it's not just inefficient, it is pedagogically irresponsible. Adults do not have the luxury of time. They lack of year of constant and effortless exposure that children enjoy. They need systematic shortcuts, and explicit grammar instructors provides exactly that. Furthermore, explicit grammar serves as a vital cognitive anchor through a process called schema building. Adult learners already possess a fully developed linguistic system, their first language. They cannot simply erase this blueprint. Instead of forcing them to ignore it, explicit instruction allows adults to actively map new linguistic structures onto their existing L1 knowledge. When you explain a grammatical rule clearly, you are giving the adult learner a framework. You are helping them to build a cognitive bridge, and this metalinguistic awareness transform language learning from a frustrating game of guesswork into a logical, structured process that respects their intellectual maturity. Then we have academic and professional success. Language learning is rarely just a hobby. For the vast majority of our future students, it's a vehicle for personal, academic, and economic transformation. As future educators, our ultimate duty is to prepare our students for the harsh realities of the world outside the classroom. And in that world, accuracy matters. So today we will argue that explicit grammar instruction is the single most powerful tool we can give to our students to ensure their high level academic and professional success. Let us begin with the immediate hurdles our students face, standardized testing. Whenever we like it or not, international exams such as IELTS, TOEFL, and Cambridge, their certificate acts as a high-state gatekeepers to global opportunities. These exams do not care if a student fluently making mistakes, they strictly and systematically penalize grammatical inaccuracies. A student could have the most brilliant, creative ideas in the world, but if their writing and speaking lack grammatical precision, the gatekeeper will close the door on them. Explicit instruction ensures that students don't just get their point across, but they that master the precise mechanics required to pass these critical instructional filters. But the stakes get even higher when they enter to a professional corporative sphere. In global business, professional communication demands absolute precision. Grammatical flaws instantly compromise professional credibility. If an employee sends an email to a multinational client or writes a corporate report filled with structural errors, it doesn't just look sloppy, it erodes the trust. It signals a lack of attention to details, the ungrammatical structures. So, on the other hand, a mastery of formal grammatical syntax opens door to a socio-economic mobility. It allows individuals from any background to speak the language of leadership, executive power, and international academia. So, accuracy is the currency of professionalism. To conclusion, to conclude, we cannot leave our future students' futures to chance or vague intuition. Implicit learning might help them to chat casually in a coffee shop, but explicit grammar instruction is what employees but it's what empowers you to command a boardroom and excel in a university lecture hall and in your job opportunities. By teaching grammar explicitly, we are equipping our students with the armor to need to thrive to a competitive and unforgiving global environment. So we are totally thinking that the grammar should be taught explicitly. Now the floor is on my friend.
Now I will defend the idea that grammar should be taught explicitly, focusing especially on two important aspects: the distinction between casual and professional language and the development of metacognitive awareness and self-correction. In modern language teaching, many people argue that students can learn grammar naturally through communication and exposure. While communicative practice is definitely important, I believe that explicit grammar instruction is still essential because it helps learners become more acquired, independent, and socially aware language users. First, explicit grammar teaching helps students understand the difference between casual language and professional or academic language. When learners are exposed only to informal English through social media, movies, or daily conversations, they may develop conversational fluency but they often struggle in formal situations such as academic writing, presentations, job interviews, or professional communication. For example, expressions like gonna, wanna, or ain't may be acceptable in casual conversation among friends, but they are generally inappropriate in academic essays or workplace communication. Without explicit instruction, students may not fully recognize these differences in register and tone. Explicit grammar teaching develops what we call register awareness, the ability to adapt language according to context, audience, and purpose. Learners begin to understand when formal sentence structures, passive voice, or academic vocabulary are necessary. For instance, let's compare these two sentences. The first one is the experiment didn't work because we messed up. The second one is the experiment was unsuccessful due to procedural errors. Both sentences communicate a similar meaning, but the second one is much more appropriate in an academic or professional environment. Explicit instruction helps students notice and produce these distinctions consciously. So this is especially important for university students and future professionals because language is strongly connected to credibility, authority, and professionalism. Knowing grammar means knowing how to present yourself appropriately in different social situations. Secondly, explicit grammar teaching improves metacognitive awareness and self-correction skills. Metacognition simply means thinking about one's own thinking. In language learning, it refers to the learner's ability to monitor, evaluate, and improve their own language production. When grammar is taught explicitly, students don't simply memorize sentences, they understand the system behind the language. As a result, they become capable of identifying their own mistakes and correcting them independently. So this creates what researchers sometimes call an internal monitor. Learners begin asking themselves questions such as, is this tense correct? Should this sentence be passive or active? Does this sound formal enough? So this process transforms students from passive learners into active editors of their own speech and writing. Self-correction is particularly important in writing. A student who understands grammar can revise an essay more effectively, recognize sentence level problems, and improve clarity without depending completely on the teacher. Moreover, metacognitive awareness encourages lifelong learning. Students who can analyze their own language use continue improving even outside the classroom because they develop independent learning habits. Another important point is that self-correction increases confidence. Many learners are afraid of making mistakes because they don't understand why something is wrong. Explicit instruction gives them the tools to identify problems logically instead of guessing. This reduces anxiety and encourages more active participation in communication. Of course, communication-based activities are valuable and necessary. However, communication alone may not always provide enough guidance for learners to notice subtle grammatical differences or develop advanced academic language skills. For this reason, explicit grammar instruction shouldn't be seen as old-fashioned or restrictive. Instead, it should be viewed as a supportive framework that strengthens communication, accuracy, and learning autonomy. So, in conclusion, explicit grammar teaching is essential because it helps learners distinguish between casual and professional language, develops awareness of context and register, improves metacognitive awareness, encourages self-correction, and promotes independent, confident language use. So, grammar is not only about rules, it's about giving learners control over how they express themselves in different situations. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for listening to us. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.